Hello everyone, this is Ben Falk for KillerSites.com. Welcome to a short screencast on using PHP, jQuery, and AJAX to load XML data. I work with Stefan on a daily basis, performing maintenance and upgrades on the various sites in the Killer Sites network. He asked me to share something I coded recently for the Killer Sites homepage. If you go to the homepage and scroll down a little bit, you'll notice this recent forum topics widget. Basically, this widget uses a combination of PHP, jQuery, and AJAX to grab data from an XML feed and display it on the page. So you'll notice that the items here match the items, the most recent posts on the forums. So let's get started by showing you exactly what we're going to build. So this is what it looks like. Pretty simple. Just has an unordered list listing all the various recent posts. And if you refresh the page, you'll notice there's a little loading animation that appears, and then the content actually loads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to pull in this forum data using PHP and jQuery. This is easily applicable to other projects. For example, if you want to pull in recent posts from a WordPress blog, you could do that with the XML feed as well. So that's the basics of what we're going to do today. Let's get started. Let me briefly discuss what tools you'll need to follow along with this video tutorial. So obviously I have Firefox. I'm going to be using that as my main browser. Because we are using PHP, it does require some sort of server. So either that can be your web hosting, may provide that to you, or you can use something like MAMP or WAMP. I'm using MAMP, which stands for Macintosh, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. It allows me to run PHP and have a database and similar things and have that all on my local machine. So MAMP is the Macintosh version. If you want to run this and you're on a Windows machine, take a look at WAMP, W-A-M-P. Stefan has video tutorials on installing and configuring both WAMP and MAMP. So take a look at those if you're confused. Okay, so I've showed you briefly what we're going to be building. Let's get started. So first off, let me show you the files that I'm working with. I have all these files are within htdocs folder, which is where MAMP requires them to be so the server can find those files. And I have a getforum.php. I have an index.php, I have a jQuery file, jQuery.js, which is the standard jQuery library. You can download that from jQuery.com. And finally, I have a loading.gif file. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's a simple animated GIF that we're going to be using. So let's dive in. So what I like to do when I start a new project is break this down into a couple steps. One of the most important things I've learned is to program incrementally, which means break things down, do the simplest things first, make sure they work, and then move on to harder and harder things. So this helps me speed up my development and will definitely help you get started as well. So we're going to start today by splitting this up into two main tasks. First off, we're going to actually grab the XML feed using PHP. And then secondly, we'll work in jQuery and AJAX. So I'm going to start with getforum.php, and let me start off with basic PHP tags. The actual function that we're going to be using to get the XML data is called simple XML load file, and you can find more information about this on php.net. Just do a search for simple XML. And one thing I should note is simple XML is PHP 5 only. So I'm going to briefly show you how to check what version of PHP you're running. So I'm just going to do PHP info, save the file, and I'm going to preview it. And I'm running PHP 5.2.11. So in case for some reason you're running something that's less than PHP 5, keep that in mind. You'll need to look for an alternative way to grab the XML data. So now that we've determined that we can use the simple XML function, let's get started. I'm going to start by creating a file variable, and I'm going to set that to the URL of the XML file that we want to be grabbing data from. So I've gone to killersites.com. Let me back up slightly. I went to the RSS image link in the bottom and the footer, and this is the file that we're going to be grabbing all of our data from. If you take a look at view source, you'll see it's all neatly organized for us. So I go back to Coda. Let me just paste that in there. So that's the first step. And then let's go XML equals simple XML load file. And we're going to load the file that we just created, that variable. Okay, so that's the first step. Now let's check what this variable contains. So I know it's going to bring back an array of data. So I'm going to do it like so. I'm going to add a pre-tag. I'm going to do a print R, which is a print human readable function, and we're going to echo out the XML. Okay, so save the file and preview. So what it does is it brings back a breakdown of that file, and for a little bit different view, here's what it's going to look like. Basically, we're going to need to sort through. We have a channel, we have an item, and what we need to do is we need to grab the title and the link. So I'm going to go back here. We can delete this. So we're going to want to do a for each loop, which will loop through each item and grab the correct bit that we want. So we're going to do XML, and we want channel item, because you'll notice that this is the section we want to get these two. So XML, channel, and item, and we want to grab that using as item. And then let's think about this for a second. We want to provide an unordered list. So I'm going to go up top here. I'm going to echo out the start of an unordered list. And then below the for each, I'm going to close that out. Excuse me. So I've closed that out, and then within this we're going to echo out our list item. And let's add both the link and the title of the forum thread. So we're going to go href equals, and we're going to do item, I believe it's link, let me just double check. Yeah, item link. And then we want, within that link, we want the item title. Okay, so let's preview that and see what we have. Excellent. So we have an unordered list, and then within each list item, we have a link to the file and the title, excuse me, a link to the forum post, and then a title. So let's go back. Let's think about this slightly differently. We probably want to limit our results. We don't necessarily want to display everything that's in the XML file. So let's do this. Let's create a limit variable, and let's plan to limit our results to 5 results. So that's the start. And then within the for each, let's exit the loop as soon as we've generated 5 results. So I'm going to do limit, and I'll subtract 1 from the limit every time we loop through that. And then we'll do a quick conditional. So if limit is 0, we want to break out of the loop. So let's check that. There we go. So we've got it limited to 5. And then the last thing we want to think about, what's going to happen if for some reason the file, the XML file that we're trying to grab data from isn't available. Maybe the hosting goes down, something happens. So let's take a look and see what it does now. Let's purposely break the link and let's do a preview. Looks like we have all sorts of warnings and notices generated, and we don't necessarily want to show that to the user. So there are a couple things we can do. I'm going to start here by using any set, and I'm going to set display errors. I'm going to set that to 0 so it doesn't show up. So let's refresh the page now and see what happens. So now we just get a blank page, which is at least a little bit better. But ideally, we want to be able to show the user some sort of feedback so they don't get confused. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do if. So if this XML file is going to be loaded, if it's able to be loaded properly, so I can delete this line. Let me tab that in and close out the if statement. So if the XML file loads properly, we display the results. If not, we want to echo out some sort of response to the user. So I'm going to echo out strong and say, oops, the most recent forum topics cannot be displayed at this time. Okay, so that'll at least generate some sort of error notice for the user so they don't get confused. And finally, let's also add a link here. Let's add a link to the killer site's recent page. So href. Let's go and find that page. So it's active topics. There we go. So we want to link to the recently active topics so the viewer can see all results rather than just the 5 that we limited the script to. That, and then we can go view all topics. Okay, so let's take a look and see what we have now. Got a mistake here. Forgot to close that off. Okay, so as long as this feed is incorrect, it looks like we get the oops message cannot be displayed. So that's perfect. So let's fix it. And awesome, we have a list, we have 5 items, and the view all topics link takes us to the recent posts. Okay, so we're set on the first section. Next step, we'll move on to a little bit of jQuery and AJAX.